Well, thanks everybody for coming this morning. Appreciate you joining us. So I'm here with Greg Benoit, not Benoit, the founder and CEO of GQenda. And so really, if you've been here before to some of these, what we're really trying to do is just help connect entrepreneurs and folks in the healthcare ecosystem. That we feel Atlanta is a great place to start and grow a health IT business, and we're trying to connect those people and resources together. So today with Greg, what we'll do is just talk through a little bit of his background, the entrepreneurial story, GQenda, how it got started and up to where it is now, and then just close with some general thoughts of how can Atlanta continue to improve on being a great place for a health IT business.
Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining. So just to get going, Greg, maybe start with, growing up, did you ever have any grand visions of being an entrepreneur or early experiences with entrepreneurship?
So growing up as a kid, I always thought about maybe owning a business, and the first one I ever really owned was a recycling business as a kid. So going around to neighbors, collecting cans and basically their trash and trying to recycle it and make millions on, putting this in the garage. Sold that business for like $100 to my mom, which was basically her saying, don't collect any neighbors' trash anymore. So that was always fun, but really, everyone always asks, how did you guys get started with GQenda? How do you think of the idea? How did this happen? And so actually got into doing what I'm doing with GQenda as a 15-year-old kid. So an anesthesiologist friend of our family came over for dinner one night, and he was really just complaining about how his group had put him in charge of building the schedule for the 20 docs in their department. And after complaining, he kind of had this light bulb moment, and he said, Greg, why don't you build the schedule for me? It'll be a really good summer project. I'll teach you all the weird rules we have as a group, and I'll pay you $1,000. And so as a 15-year-old kid, the only part that really registered was the $1,000 part. I really wasn't listening after he said that. But I went over to his house, I learned all the weird things they did. I built their schedule using Microsoft Excel. No fancy software, nothing like that. And then the next summer, a radiology group reached out and said, hey, I talked to my buddy in anesthesia. I heard you're that kid building schedules on the cheap. And so I was like, yes. It's $2,500 this time, though. But got a kid from the neighbor to help, and kind of fast forward to college. And I was doing this for about 10 or 11 groups that I just met by word of mouth over the years, and so always thought in the back of my mind it'd be neat to build software that would do this automatically. And after graduating with a computer science degree in May of '06, moved back to Atlanta and started building GQenda as we know it today.
Yeah, so let me pause there and go through a few of those. I think there's lots of interesting things there. So you're having that dinner, talking about the problem, you're hearing the $1,000, but as you started getting into it, did you have any visions at that point of wow, this is really interesting, or wow, this could be a business, or is it still a project?
Really just a project, just making money as a 15, 16-year-old kid through college, making $30,000 to $35,000 a year at that age as an outsourced, really service provider. So like, child labor, building employee schedules for healthcare groups. So really wasn't thinking this is the business, but was excited to finally have that dawning moment, actually Thanksgiving of junior year of college. So when I convinced my parents, hey, I'm not gonna go get a job after school, I'm gonna move back in, move back home, move back in with them, and hopefully build something meaningful and valuable someday.
How was that conversation?
It was interesting. They supported, but they also said, we want you to go through the normal interview process. Being a computer science major, the typicals are Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and so went through all of those and had a nice offer to go work for Microsoft, and turning that down. My friends, my family, they were all like, are you sure you don't want to go get a job and like maybe take a few years, learn some things? But really starting a business anytime is hard. It's not going to ever get easier. But right out of college, I felt it was maybe easier than after really tasting what it's like to make money. And
so as you're going through those first couple ones while you're in college, right? still doing it in Excel? Like, did you have any scheduling background? Did you augment with any additional math or other knowledge to try and help you?
Really, the Excel sheet evolved over years, and it got smarter and better with formulas and macros and things like that to light up if we were breaking a certain nuanced rule that one of the customers may have. But really, no real true sophistication in terms of math or algorithms. But after that, kind of getting the green light junior year in college, senior year really started to think about what those algorithms are, really used a lot of different professors and different folks at the school, a couple of them that I've become friends with over the years, and started thinking about how do you solve this scheduling problem. So quick background, GQenda is basically a employee scheduling company software for healthcare. And so that's a problem that's solved at Starbucks and at Octane and thousands of businesses around the country. But healthcare has its unique constraints. And so that was really fun to start thinking about how do we solve a problem that's very well known across the world, but specific to healthcare.
And so as you think about that, right, as you mentioned, healthcare has many complexities. How did you think about zoning in on, well, the dinner was with the anesthesiologist and then a radiologist, but what about, is it a operating room setting? Is it an office setting? Like, how did you think about where to focus on scheduling?
Yeah, so I feel like we're still thinking about that. But we, I think a lot of people always ask, hey, what other competitors do you guys have in the space? Why are you guys so much bigger, probably 10 times bigger than our closest competitor? And so they always ask, why are you guys, what's the secret sauce? And really, I think one of the big reasons is because building all of those schedules, the 10 or 11 or dozen or so that I was building by hand, it was all kinds of specialties. It was anesthesia, radiology, pathology, cardiology, ER group, OBGYN group, and so we really had sort of a spectrum of different groups and knew how they scheduled. A lot of our competitors started by an anesthesia group going to them and saying, hey, I want you to build me software that will do this. And so their software might work really well in anesthesia, or another competitor's really good at emergency medicine scheduling. But we were fortunate to be the only company that had that experience across so many different specialties.
So that's an interesting point. One thing we see oftentimes with startups as they're getting going is, how much do I start with professional services or doing it manually until I get enough to figure out to go build it? Because to your point, one of the challenges, you go build it right away, and it's good for this market, but then you've now wasted a bunch of features. So how did you think, when was the right time to start scaling building versus just do it manually?
So if we think about, like, from age 15 to 22, I was really doing it manually. I mean, got more sophisticated with some macros and formulas, but it was really, and that's too long. But I think there is a point in every company where when somebody wants something from you that isn't in your wheelhouse, or you don't have the software to do it yet, I do think one of the best ways to truly learn before you build it is to do it manually, do it with professional services, do it behind the scenes. And that's really hard to do because it's time consuming, but we were fortunate to sort of have that opportunity. Ours was too long, but it was related to age and school and other priorities. But I do think even today at GQenda, we have 350 employees and multiple offices. We still get requests from customers on different types of items that they want the application to do that we've never heard of. And if we say yes, we do usually try to do it with professional services first before we actually go build software. So that's something that we still are true to this day.
Great. So now let's go back. You said college, junior year, made the decision that says, I want to go after this. What was your plan to go after it? How did you think about the next step of it's just me alone, I'm going to start building something, or I'm going to go hire some people, or how did you think about what the next step was?
Yeah, so I didn't even know what raising money was. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. So moving back to Atlanta, I didn't know that you can raise money with an idea and some traction, and we actually had revenue, $30,000 a year. But I didn't ever think about hiring anybody or having somebody join the team and the vision. It was really, a solo experience where I was, writing code all day from like 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then at 4 p.m. I'd actually stop and I'd go wait tables and bartend at Ippolito's, an Italian restaurant at Russell Road in Abernathy. And so I'd do that and I'd make, 50, 60, 80 bucks a night cash. And then I'd get up the next day and basically repeat and do the same thing. And so looking back now, knowing, it is a lot easier to get people excited about a vision. It is, I think, easier today to raise kind of initial money, whatever that might be, $100,000, $250,000. I do think it's easier today than back then. But I would have definitely probably gone that route because the time from idea to delivery, it took about a year and a half until version 1 of the application was ready, and we launched in January 2008. And so it would have been much better to probably have additional help and resources. A co-founder, would have been.
So to that point, even absent raising money, did you ever think about finding a co-founder, or how did you think through that? Or looking back, would you have done it differently?
Looking back, I definitely would have probably found somebody to embark on the journey together. There were lots of like dark, lonely moments along that way. I kind of felt like our customers at the time, call it dozen or so groups, I did feel like they were co-founders and they were keeping me going. I would call them, I'd talk to them, I'd show them early versions of the product. So that was one benefit, that starting a business right out of the gate, you usually don't have a ton of customers that you know a whole lot about. But I was fortunate to have worked with a lot of these folks for the last, call it 6, 7, 8 years. And so I'd become friends with them. I'd been over to their homes, and so they were kind of my support network, looking back. But that was a very unique experience that not everybody, would have. So I definitely, now I'm fortunate to be in a position where I'm able to invest in other entrepreneurs, and it's pretty much a requirement that they have co-founders, and it's not just a solo person.
And so on that point, just let me pause there for a second, and I'll go back to the story. Looking at co-founders, just in general and from your experience, do you look for somebody who's similar, complementary, sales, techie bound? Like, how do you think what's the right mix or balance for co-founders?
Yeah, I think the right mix is somebody that's a little bit more introverted and technical and able to execute, and then having a complementary co-founder that is maybe more sales, marketing, able to get out in front of folks and speak and start to get the vision going. That's a perfect dynamic and mix. Hard to find, but it's out there. People, I think there's a lot of really great meetups for finding co-founders, and a place like this, Atlanta Tech Village, is the hot spot for that. And getting people motivated about an idea and bringing them together, I think you do want to have co-founders that are going to be complementary to each other. It's out there, it exists, and we definitely both know companies where it's been a success.
Great. So let's go to V1. You're starting to, you say, all right, I've got enough, I got some customers, they're giving me feedback. How do you know what to build for V1 that can take you from the 5 to 10 customers to 50 to 100?
Yeah, so V1 was really 4 things that we needed. And we needed a scheduling algorithm, so that's all the math and automation behind building a employee schedule for healthcare. So we needed an algorithm. We needed a screen that would let you modify and edit the output, so basically a schedule administration screen, think of like Excel. We needed a place where everybody in the group could view their schedule, and we needed reporting, so just really basic reporting, like how many times did I work this shift over a 3-month period or whatever it is. So we needed 4 things, and so that was V1 that we launched in January of 2008. Those 4 things, saying it like that, it sounds like that should be easy, but it was a lot to kind of get that stood up. And then now, GQenda has hundreds, if not thousands, of features with requesting and swapping and time and attendance, and we calculate the gross pay for 200,000 healthcare providers every pay period. So it's definitely evolved, but those four things were kind of what we were rowing towards. And launching in January 2008, that was the year we went from basically 0 customers to immediately 10 customers that were friendly. But then by the end of the year, we finished with about 105 customers. And so that was definitely a turning point. And when, I think my parents, my friends, everybody was like, maybe this thing has legs and is gonna take off. I'll never forget being on the phone with somebody. This was like late 2008. And this doctor was super excited to sign up for the software. And he said, when can you start? And so, still pretty much a one-man show. And so I kind of put the phone on hold. I was like, I got to talk to some folks and got to talk to my implementation team. I got to talk, we're sounding a lot bigger than we really were. So I kind of put the phone on hold. I spin around a little bit, pick the phone back up. I'm like, hey, look, if you will pay a $40,000 acceleration fee, we can bump you to the top of the list and start next week. And without even thinking about it, he said, I'm sending the check right now. And so that was late 2008 and was definitely a turning point where it was like people are clamoring for this so much that they want to jump to the front of the line and use the software sooner. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic, but having that feeling is something that I'll remember for the rest of my life.
That's a great story because as entrepreneurs, we talk about product market fit a lot. It's always an ever changing, and do you ever fully get there? And was that sort of a light bulb moment for you that says now we've got something there?
It was. That was in my mind a kind of a holy cow moment. It's like, whoa, these people are willing to pay extra money because there was already an implementation fee. It was like $5,000 or something, and to get back on the phone and say, hey, it's $40,000. This is the best we can do, and without even thinking about it for a second, the doctor was like, okay, I'm FedExing the check tonight. And that was a turning point for the company. It gave us enough money, it gave us enough security to actually go out and hire our first employee. We were excited, and shortly thereafter that we moved out of my parents' house and into the Ravinia as our first office space. So.
Well, great. I want to go forward from that, but let me just pause back on one more point before we go forward. So, talk about building the first product with customers. Talk to me about the value of that because we oftentimes see people will go, hey, I'm going to go build this great product with these 30 features in the lab, and then they come out and try and sell it and have challenges versus you're building it directly with a development partner. Talk to me about the value of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible value. I look for that in other entrepreneurs. It's one of my first questions is, hey, do you have a set of folks that are constantly giving you feedback, that you trust, that you can show things to, that are even willing to be early adopters? Our first group that ever used the software was the same group that our family friend was from, and so they used the software, and I'll never forget showing them features. And then that night I did some updates, and it blew away all of the data and the settings that they had just put in over the last month. And so that was a really tough phone call. There were no backups. I didn't even know what a backup was. And so, having that trust where I could call them, and then I went back over to the house. We reset up all these settings that they had already spent hours and weeks putting in. But having something like that, where you can really bounce ideas off of and get different thoughts and opinions and do it in a rapid way, it was invaluable for what we were trying to build.
That's great, and I definitely share those sentiments. So as you're any company, any size, right, whether it's just you or 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people, there's always that trade-off of what do I build next, feature, function on the product roadmap.
Yes.
What are some lessons learned you would apply in addition, like leveraging development partners, but to know how do you prioritize what to build?
Yeah, so today, we have a little bit more formal process with customer advisory boards and things like that, but it's really, when you boil it down, it's still just like the old days when I had like 10 or so folks I could call up and ask ideas of. But when we think about the priorities and how we prioritize different items, I think it's really important to stay focused. Like early on at the company, we had all kinds of ideas that came through, like one doctor was saying that he wanted our software to integrate with his kids' school calendar so that it would bring their schedule in, and then it would build different things based on his kids' soccer practice. And it's really cool idea. That's the hard part, But the reality is, like, we're not going to go do that. But we had to make sure the doctor knew it was a really great idea. It would be really cool to do that. But I feel like those rabbit holes are really easy to kind of go down, and we went down them. But I feel like since we were 100% bootstrapped, and like literally every penny was sort of the company's money. We were extremely disciplined and careful and thoughtful in every single line of code that we wrote and every single feature that we pushed out. We were scrutinized, and we made sure this is the way we should be going. So I think it's much better to be thoughtful at the early stage than to just accelerate and go fast.
Great. So let's pick back up then, right? You said, hey, had the light bulb moment, got the money fronted, now you're going to start hiring a team and move forward. One question we often get is, what's the right order to hire people, and how you as the CEO figure out what to start letting go? How did you think about that?
Yeah, so for us, the demand of over 100 customers in year one, and then several more in year two. We were at 250 customers by 2009. For us, we really weren't thinking about sales yet. We were really thinking about how do we get all of these customers implemented, because as soon as they were implemented and they were live on the software, that meant they were going to send us an annual subscription fee. So they would prepay annually up front, which was really important because we were bootstrapped and we needed that money. That was essentially our funding. And so for us, the first hires were, how do we get these 200 customers up and live in, call it, 8 weeks, 4 weeks? What is the timing? We didn't even know. We thought maybe we can do it in a week, maybe it takes 16 weeks. So really formalizing what it means to go from signing a contract to getting them up and live was our first priority. So we hired implementation and customer success folks right out of the gate, probably a handful of them.
And then as that started to keep going, right, one of the things we see is, right, you wrote the initial code, you did the initial sales. How did you decide what areas you had to start letting go to move into other areas as a CEO?
Yeah, so naturally the next area we were interested in was sales. In terms of product development, I still was heavily writing code, but also doing demos. So we did hire a developer that would, just a single developer that joined the company. But really, we knew the next evolution was going to be sales, and so hiring sales. How do you do that? What does that look like? Do you run out and hire some head honcho SVP of sales, or do you sort of just hire account executives? And so we went the path of hiring 4 business SDRs. So we hired 4 SDRs right out of the chute and 2 account executives. And then a few months after that, brought in a director of sales. So we didn't go kind of the top-down approach. We definitely went the bottom-up and hired the SDRs first. They were essentially filling up my calendar with demos. Once my calendar was crazy full with demos, we went ahead and hired account executives. And then from there, we brought in, a few months later, a director of sales. So I'm a big proponent of kind of that bottom-up approach, which is first fill up the CEO or whoever's the demo person, fill up their calendar. Get it so full that they're gasping for air, they're running between demos. This was literally how we did that. And then essentially brought in 2 account executives and then ultimately director of sales. And that model worked for us. I don't know if it works for every industry, but I definitely think it works for healthcare. And I know some other folks have had great success with that as well.
Great. And I like that approach too, of sort of the staging it, right? You don't have to make the big decision all at once.
Yes.
Test a little bit and keep getting progress and moving forward.
Yep.
So as you start to scale up now, you went from your 5 to 10 customers while you're in college to 100 plus. Looking back, what are some lessons learned on things you would have done differently scaling up to that point?
Yeah, so a lot of people always ask, what were some of the bumps along the way? What were some of the, some of the hard times that you hit? What inhibited you from doing whatever it was, achieving growth or goal or sales? And really looking back, one of the biggest hurdles we had as a company was in 2009, we moved into our first office space, and it was 2,500 square feet. This is up at the Ravinia across from Perimeter Mall. And we were doing cartwheels down the hallway. We were saying, we're set for a decade. We're going to be here forever. And we had just signed a 4-year lease. And a year later, we were busting at the seams. We had people in the hallway. We had people outside of our suite. I mean, it was probably a total, fire code violation. But we went to the landlord and we said, hey, we need more space. There was space next door. There was space other places. And it was a very difficult process for a company that was growing fast to have additional physical space. And when you look back on that and you think, how can something like office space, which in my mind is a commodity, how can that inhibit a fast-growing company? It should never inhibit anybody from growing a business. And so that burned in my memory as a problem that someday I want to come back and try to solve for the next generation companies. But that was a physical space was actually it was inhibiting us from growing fast. So looking back, I'd probably be a lot more proactive about it. I think today there's a lot more choices in that space, but it was extremely difficult just thinking about, we need to hire 5 or 10 more people. Where are we going to put them? And it shouldn't be a problem that any of us as entrepreneurs think about.
Sure. We'll come back to the TechRise solution to some of that in the end. So now, starting to grow, starting to scale. You mentioned bootstrapped, customers funding along the way. Talk to me about when Francisco partners come in, what sort of prompted the decision to take some money at that point?
Yeah, so we had bootstrapped the business from 0 to 20 million in recurring revenue, and at that time we were thinking like, how do we build the next generation of this company? What should it be? What does it look like? How do we get there? Can we continue to brute force hustle the way we were? None of us at the company had ever run companies the size that we were at the time. And so we started to think about the legacy of this company and are we going to be able to continue kind of brute force hustling? And after kind of looking around with our very millennial management team at the time, and saying, maybe we need a partner that has done this time and time again. And so for us, this is when we started thinking, this was like 2015, and we started thinking, maybe there is a partner out there. Let's hire some advisors. Let's go out to market and see, are there private equity groups? Are there venture groups that can help propel us forward and take this from a $20 million recurring business to a $100 million recurring business? And so we ran a broad process. We went out to probably in the neighborhood of about 80 private equity firms, and ended up getting back somewhere in the neighborhood of like 50 bids of interest, and narrowed that down to a handful, and met with each of those over time. And so for us, we were very excited about Francisco Partners because GQenda is actually the 3rd workforce management company that they've ever invested in. So they invested in a retail workforce management company. They invested in another healthcare workforce management company, and now GQenda. And so that was extremely appealing to us and attractive, but also their reputation in healthcare. They're arguably maybe the most prestigious investor in healthcare. And so all of those different things aligned. They weren't the highest bidder of the company. They didn't give us the greatest value. But for us, it didn't matter. It was more of the long-term goal. How do we go from 20 million to 100 million? Let's go find a partner that will help us, recognize patterns. They will help us with best practices. They've done this 150 times or whatever it is across their portfolio. So that's really what sort of brought upon the idea of like finding a partner out there that could take us to the next level.
So great. So maybe help extrapolate that to, putting yourself back in your shoes from earlier entrepreneurs debating, do I raise money or not?
Yeah.
But then specifically to the point of, if I do decide to go raise money,
yeah, what
am I looking for? Because I think you made an interesting point that they weren't the highest valuation, but you felt the value they would add was better in the long run. So what advice do you have for entrepreneurs to think about that trade-off?
Yeah, I think valuation is a check the box, right? Like they have to get in the right ballpark or realm of the valuation that's in anyone's head. But once you're there, I think it's very important to think about, hey, these are people I'm about to be in a lifeboat with these people, and are we all rowing in the same direction? Are they even in the same boat I'm in, or are they in a different boat? And so I think that's really important to think about, because anytime someone invests, the typical horizon is going to be 3 to 5 years. So you're going to be meeting with these people. You're going to be having quarterly meetings, having weekly phone calls potentially, giving them updates. How helpful are they going to be in taking you from where you are to where you want to be? And so for us, the valuation was sort of a check the box. They were in the range, and essentially at that point it came down to who do we like best? Who do we see ourselves going in and achieving this $100 million goal? And they really, they stood out. They stood out a lot from all the others. So I think that's really important to evaluate.
Great. So a couple years now since then, sort of tell us where you're at now with GQenda and what your current sort of priorities are.
Yeah, so today, this year, GQenda will do $70 million in recurring revenue. So we're hot on the path to $100 million. We're 35% EBITDA margins, which is a great thing. It's something very popular in healthcare that people look for. And so, we definitely are thinking about 3 main things. How do we increase our total addressable market? So when we think about GQenda in North America, there's probably about 1 million to 1.5 million healthcare providers that need software like GQenda. And today we've got 250,000 of them. So there are actually still 1 million people out there building schedules in Excel still, or paper. So we're actively attacking that side. So we're extremely excited about the upside of the greenfield market ahead. But we're also thinking about what are some additional products that we can layer on top of the 250,000 folks using our software. And really the last one is mergers and acquisitions. So we completed our first acquisition about 2 years ago, where we acquired number 2 in the space. And so we're actively looking. We've hired some advisors to help us look at, are there adjacent healthcare companies that do something similar but we could bolt on? So those are kind of the 3 things we're thinking about of how we go from where we are to north of $100 million in revenue. And ultimately our goal as a management team is we want to build a $1 billion company. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. We still have a lot of work ahead of us. But we're definitely hot on the path.
That's great. What a great story. So let me pause on the addressable market point. That's another question we get a lot from entrepreneurs is, well, how big does my initial market need to be? Should I start with a niche and then expand? I'm being told by investors it's not big enough. How should entrepreneurs think about that?
Yeah, I think, we got this. This was the biggest scrutiny in our process was, hey, GQenda, is this like a $200 million market, a $300 million market? What is the total addressable market? And so for us, it was always a question that they had. And I do think it's really important to think about a niche market and how can I really be the master of whatever domain it is, because expanding from there, if you are successful, we've found that it's extremely easy to expand from there into adjacent markets where you can start to cross-sell, upsell additional products and services. And so I'm a fan of sort of thinking about solving a problem that's complex or whatever it is. There's no easy problems in healthcare, so they're all complex. So I think find one, solve it, and expand from there.
Very good. So now GQenda's rolling forward. You've also added TechRise next door. Congrats on that, and doing some early investing. Sort of what else is on your plate now as well with some of those things?
Yeah, so a lot of people ask about TechRise, and really that was that kind of burned memory from Office Space early on. So TechRise is essentially a solution to fast-growing companies that that need flexible office space. They might only want to do a 1-year, 2-year, or 3-year lease, bring your laptop, show up, and start working. And so it's been really fun. The building is essentially full, so there is a need, I think, in the marketplace. Being next door to a place like this definitely helps feed new customers over to TechRise. But really, 99% of my time is in the day-to-day CEO role at GQenda, to really do what we're trying to do and make a huge impact. It's more than a full-time job. So I did a little bit of early investing, and I still meet up with entrepreneurs often and hear ideas but personally, pretty much 100% focused on GQenda and building, a great company for Atlanta and for the healthcare market here. It's a great place to be a healthcare company, and a lot of mentors out there and a lot of really great people that have built huge companies related to healthcare. So.
Well, great. Let me ask one last question on those lines and open it up to the audience here. So you mentioned Atlanta. All the different resources in Atlanta, starting a business in healthcare. What are some things Atlanta does well to help be a place to start a business, and what are some things Atlanta can improve on to make it easier to start a healthcare business?
It's a great question. Look, events like this are huge. These didn't exist even several years ago, specific to healthcare. Events like this exist for all kinds of other industries, but I think healthcare is just such a unique animal. It's very interesting. Very different from many of the other companies that are in this building that are serving other markets. So I think it's really important to find a healthcare mentor in the Atlanta area. So I personally did this. I remember outgrowing certain mentors along the way. The first mentor I ever outgrew was my parents. I remember being at an Atlanta Thrashers hockey game and talking to my dad and telling him, hey, I'm thinking about offering our employees health care, and paying for it, maybe even stock options. And he was like, no, this is your company. You've worked way too hard. Don't do that. And so I kind of quietly kept my opinion to myself, but knew at that moment I'd probably outgrown his advice, and so quickly scrambled to find another mentor along the way. And so ran into Andy Monin, who started VendorMate, which is a healthcare credentialing company that he sold a few years ago and had a great exit. And so also Bird Blitch along the way, so met him, has been a great mentor. And so I think that I think that a lot of people are like, well, I don't know if I should reach out to a mentor, somebody that I think could help me. But I promise you, whoever it is that can help you along the way as a mentor, if you reach out to them, you meet them, they are absolutely going to help you, because I guarantee you that's how they also got there, was with their own set of mentors. And it's a great feeling when you outgrow those mentors along the way. It means you're doing something right, and it means that they've done really well by you.
Great. And then one thing Atlanta could improve on, to try and be a place to help start and grow a health IT business.
Yeah, I think, for Atlanta, I think we do already have a really good healthcare community here. It's small, but in terms of increasing that footprint, I think that investors. I think we've had a lot of really great exits along the way from healthcare companies, and so I think that having a specific healthcare investment firm or arm of a firm, I think that would help if it were local. So if there's more money going into local healthcare companies from local money, that could make a huge impact. And a lot of times the outside investors that aren't really healthcare specific, they are interested in healthcare companies, but it's definitely more impactful and powerful if somebody's focused on investing in healthcare companies. And so, look, I hope to serve that someday with success from GQenda, and when there's more time. I personally plan on investing heavily in other healthcare startups here in the market, but one person can't do it all. So I think a lot of us that have great exits, that have access to capital, I think that we should really focus on healthcare companies. It's a great time to invest in the next generation healthcare companies.
Well, Greg, thanks so much. What a great story, your rise from working with your parents and sitting at early dinner to where you're at now.
That's right.
Let me open it up to questions from the audience here.
Hey, Greg. Thank you so much. I'm doing well. My name is Mackenzie Folan. I'm working here actually with AT Adventures. Quick question for you on kind of your early story. So kind of, I don't want to say being forced by your parents to go through the interview process, getting a really attractive offer, turning it down. I know that you had the success before with some customers kind of already in the hopper, so you knew that your concept was kind of proven. What's your advice for people who kind of have that attractive offer or are thinking about another career path, maybe don't have as much proven success? How set does their idea or problem have to be in order to kind of take that leap? Or what's your kind of advice when they're trying to riddle with that decision?
Yeah, I think, I think having an offer in the hand is a great place to be so that you're able to weigh the two options. But if you're in a position financially, mentally, and you're able to actually take that leap to starting a company, your idea does not have to be perfectly ironed out by any means. But if you're in that mindset and you're in a good place and financially you can make it work for somewhere between 12 to 24 months, if you're able to map that out and see that, oh, I can do this. It might mean you have to go wait tables and bartend at night or on the weekends, but if you're able to map that out in a 12 to 24 month period, I would absolutely take the leap, because 24 months from now, you can get another job.
Greg B., John Birdsong. Can you talk to us about the sales process of GQenda, right? When I think of healthcare, I think of lots and lots of red tape, and you were able to start a SaaS software company in healthcare and sell direct to a lot of the key decision makers, and then moved upstream. Can you talk to us about the sales process to the direct to the doctor, and then now as you go through hospitals, like how you have to be HIPAA compliant and all that? It provides some clarity for the basic SaaS.
So selling in healthcare, originally we were selling strictly bottom up. So we were going department by department. We were selling anesthesia department at Emory and radiology department at Piedmont, and all over the country, selling departmentally, sort of what we call the bottom up approach. I think in healthcare, there's two approaches, and sometimes you can do both at the same time. So there's that bottom-up approach, and then depending on what your company or product serves in healthcare, there's also the top-down approach. We originally started that bottom-up approach, and then about 4 years ago, UPenn health system called up and said, hey, we're using GQenda in like 8 or 9 departments. We want you to come up here and pitch the entire health system on using GQenda across our 30 departments. And so, of course, this is great. We hopped on the airplane, went up there, and they were our first top-down sale, but we got their bottom-up. And so today at GQenda, we've split the teams into sort of the bottom-up approach and the top-down. And now we have close to 30 enterprise customers, and these are multi-million-dollar SaaS agreements. And so, I think that healthcare is unique in that there's so many different places that budget exists. You've got budget at the department level, maybe even the sub-department level. Then you've got budget maybe at the health system level, and then maybe the doctors work for a physician foundation, and you've got budget over there. You also have a medical school. So we see often, we try to pull from all of those budgets, but the idea is there's, I think, understanding where the budget can come from is something we did late in the game. But looking back, we were focused mostly on just that departmental budget. But there are so many different places that they can find money to buy great products. from great companies. So I think that going through and thinking about all the different places that you can get budget and then aligning a sales team around those.
Well, follow up on that question. I've got a little question that kind of came to mind. But on the budgeting side, dealing with healthcare businesses, I've noticed that there's a difference between capital expenditures for them and recurring software services. Yes. That becomes a very difficult thing to traverse within those organizations. So I'd be interested in that. And then the follow-up question is, you decide to go private equity versus venture capital. And I kind of wonder, what is the decision-making process behind that, and how much of creating some kind of personal windfall or windfall for the people that you've brought in before that actually goes into that decision? Because I know private equity businesses take different positions within a business as opposed to venture capital business.
Yeah, great questions. So a first question, capital expense versus operating expense. So we definitely always try to get into the operating expense, but it is sometimes easier to be classified as capex. But for us, we really don't have a lot of capex with ours since software, so it's hard to get classified there. But operational expense, there still are a bunch of different areas that you can pull budget from in an OpEx way. But there are, what we find is usually there's like 8 or 9 people that can say no, but not one single person that can say yes. And so that's common in healthcare. If everybody has sold to healthcare, we know there's like 9 or 10 people along the way that can say no, but unfortunately not usually one person that can say yes. But we definitely think about those budgets a lot as we're pricing. We come up with creative ways to price it for the customer. Maybe year one is all CapEx, and then after that it's OpEx, and it's got to go through their budget cycle. So I think that being creative and making that part of your sales process and understanding how are they going to fund this, how are they going to pay for it, and then it's on you to figure out a creative way to work with them. On the other question, venture capital versus private equity. So for us, I think we were most likely, for our market, the total addressable size, we were not in a land grab situation where we needed to go and immediately overnight hire 300 salespeople and go do it. If we at GQenda today, we have about 50 people on our sales team. That's including SDRs and account executives. If we were to go triple that to 150 people tomorrow, I don't think that, we're not convinced that that means we would go any faster than we are today. So we were in that position where it was not a land grab situation. If it were a land grab situation, which I have a lot of friends running really popular Atlanta companies that are in a land grab situation, I would 100% go the venture route, and I'd go hire 300 people tomorrow, and I would run after all of that business. For GQenda being at $20 million, 40% profitable at the time, we weren't thinking the venture route. It didn't cross our mind because of the market we were serving and the situation we were in. So I do think it's something everybody should think about, because the private equity route is definitely different, but they are a great partner. We've been able to do an acquisition. We have another one coming up this week that we're excited about. That'll be public knowledge on Monday. And we were able to acquire this other company 100% using debt. And so no dilution to any of the shareholders. And that's, again, it's a luxury of the private equity backing.
Cool. One more question here. Then we...
Yep, thank you. So when trying to find a partner, what were some terms and criteria they were looking for prior to investing?
Trying to find a private equity partner?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I think that all of the private equity groups in healthcare, they're very concerned with, is this in a product or an area that Epic or Cerner are going to go into? So that's usually the number one question they try to figure out is Epic going to roll this out next year and squash you? And so that's definitely something that they I think are considering on every company. In healthcare, these private equity groups, I think if the partners of private equity groups have any children, I assume they name them all EBITDA, because they love EBITDA, and so that, I think, is also something they look for. Is, hey, the business may not be profitable today, but is there a path to it? How can we take where we're at today and get to profitability, doing what we're doing today with maybe a few other assumptions? So those are definitely two big things that I think every private equity group is looking at. And the last one is what's the team like? We definitely have noticed that the private equity group only really wants to have one management team member that is their special project. I happen to be that. So I've never worked anywhere else except at Polito's. So every day I'm running a company that's bigger than it was yesterday. And so far at Francisco Partners, I'm the only founder CEO that has lasted this long, and they're extremely proud of it. They have me do all these phone calls with other founders, but they definitely like experience. So they like to think, oh, okay, let's go plug in a CEO of this company. Let's go re-rack the management team. So usually they only like to have sort of one project on their management team. And so those are three things they're definitely thinking about. Is, how much EBITDA can we get out of this business over time? Is some big Epic or Cerner gonna move into this? And what's the management team look like for us to get there?
Great. Well, Greg, thank you so much for coming today in the stories.
You.
Thank you,
Thanks
everybody.
for having me.